R2, Article 101 to Article 238 and Part 5 to Part 7 of the Constitution. We will continue from Part 5 of the Constitution. In the last video, we completed up to 100 section of Part 5 and we continue Part 5, 101 section onwards. Disqualification of members. Article, not section, article. Article 101, vacation of seats. Article 102, disqualification for membership. 103, decision on questions as to disqualification of members. 104, penalty for sitting and voting before making oath or affirmation under Article 99 or when not qualified or when disqualified. Powers, privileges, immunities of Parliament and its member. Article 105, powers, privileges, etc. of the House of Parliament and of the members and committees thereof. 106, salaries and allowances of members. Legislative procedure. Article 107, provisions as to introduction and passing of bills. 108, joint sitting of both houses in certain cases. 109, special procedure in respect of money bills. 110, definition of money bills. 111, assent to bills. Procedure in financial matters. You can pronounce it as a financial also and financial also. So procedure in financial matters, Article 112, annual financial statement. 113, procedure in Parliament with respect to estimates. 114, appropriation bills. 115, supplementary, additional and excess grants. 116, votes on accounts, votes of credit and exceptional grants. Article 117, special provisions as to financial bills. Procedure generally. Article 118, rules of procedure. Article 119, regulation by law of procedure in Parliament in relation to financial business. 120, language to be used in Parliament. 121, restriction on discussion in Parliament. 122, courts not to inquire into proceedings of Parliament. Chapter 3, legislative powers of the President. Article 123, power of President to promulgate ordinance during recess of Parliament. Chapter 4, the Union Judiciary. Article 124, establishment and constitution of the Supreme Court. 124A, National Judicial Appointments Commission. 124B, functions of commission. 124C, power of Parliament to make law. 125, salaries, etc. of judges. 126, appointment of acting Chief Justice. 127, appointment of ad hoc judges. Ad hoc means temporary. 128, attendance of retired judges at sitting of the Supreme Court. 129, Supreme Court to be the court of record. 130, seat of Supreme Court. 131, original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. 131A, now omitted. It was related to exclusive jurisdiction of Supreme Court in regard to questions as to constitutional validity of certain laws. So that article now 131A omitted. Article 132, appellate jurisdiction of the Supreme Court in appeals from high courts in certain cases. Article 133, appellate jurisdiction of Supreme Court in appeals from the High Court in regard to civil matters. Article 134, appellate jurisdiction of Supreme Court in regards to criminal matters. Article 134A, certificate of appeal to the Supreme Court. Article 135, jurisdictions and powers of federal court under existing law to be exercisable by the Supreme Court. Article 136, special leave to appeal by the Supreme Court. 137, review of judgment or orders by the Supreme Court. 138, enlargement of the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. 139, conferment on the Supreme Court of power to issue certain writs. 139A, transfer of certain cases. 140, ancillary power of the Supreme Court. 141, law declared by the Supreme Court to be binding on all courts. 142, enforcement of decrees and orders of the Supreme Court and orders as to discovery, etc. 143, power of the President to consult the Supreme Court. 144, civil and judicial authorities to act in aid of the Supreme Court. 144A, now omitted. It was related to special provision as to disposal of questions relating to the constitutional validity of laws. Now this article 144A is omitted. Article 145, rules of courts, etc. 146, officers and servants of the expenses of the Supreme Court. Article 147, interpretation. Chapter 5, Comptroller and Auditor General of India. Article 148, Comptroller and Auditor General of India. 149, duties and power of the Comptroller and Auditor General. 150, forms of accounts of the Union and of the states. 151, audit reports. Part 6, the states. Chapter 1, General. Article 152, definition. Chapter 2, Executive. The Governor. Article 153, Governors of States. 154, Executive power of the state. 155, appointment of governor. 156, term of office of governor. 157, qualifications for appointment as governor. 158, conditions of governor's office. 159, oath or affirmation by the governor. 160, discharge of the function of the governor in certain contingencies. 161, power of governor to grant pardon, etc. and to suspend, remit, or commute sentences in certain cases. 162, extent of executive power to state. Council of Ministers. 163, Council of Ministers to aid and advise governor. 164, other provisions as to ministers. The Advocate General of the state. 165, Advocate General of the state. Conduct of the government business. Article 166, conduct of the business of the government of state. 167, duties of the Chief Minister as a respect to the furnishing of the information to governor, etc. Chapter 3, the state legislature. General. Article 168, Constitution of Legislature in States. 169, Abolition of creation of legislative councils in states. 170, Composition of the legislative assemblies. Legislative assembly means Vidhan Sabha and legislative councils in state means Vidhan Parishad. Article 171, Composition of legislative councils. Article 172, Duration of state legislature. 173, Qualification for membership of the state legislature. 174, Sessions of the state legislature, prorogation and dissolution. 175, Rights of the governor to address and send messages to the house or houses. 176, Special addresses by the governor. 177, Rights of ministers and advocate general as respects the houses. Officers of the state legislature. Article 178, the Speaker and Deputy Speaker of the Legislative Assembly. 179, vacation and resignation of or removal from the offices of Speaker and Deputy Speaker. 180, power of the Deputy Speaker and other persons to perform the duties of the officer of or to the act as a Speaker. 181, the Speaker or the Deputy Speaker not to preside while a resolution for his removal from the office is under consideration. Article 182, the Chairman or Deputy Chairman of the Legislative Council. Article 183, vacation and resignation of and the removal from the offices of the Chairman and Deputy Chairman. 184, power of the Deputy Chairman and other persons to perform the duties of the office of or to act as Chairman. 185, the Chairman or the Deputy Chairman not to preside while a resolution for his removal from office is under consideration. Article 186, salaries and allowances of the Speaker and Deputy Speaker and the Chairman and Deputy Chairman. 187, Secretariat of State Legislature. Conduct of business. Article 188, oath and or affirmation by members. 189, voting in houses, power of houses to act notwithstanding vacancies and quorum. Disqualifications of members. Article 190, vacation of seats. Article 191, disqualification for membership. 192, decision on questions as to disqualification of members. 193, penalty for sitting and voting before making oath or affirmation under Article 188 or when not qualified or when disqualified. Power, privileges and immunities of state legislature and their members. Article 194, powers, privileges, etc. of the House legislatures and of the members and committees thereof. 195, salaries and allowances of members. Legislative procedure. 196, provisions as to introduction and passing of bills. 197, restriction on powers of legislative council as to bills other than money bills. 198, special procedure in respect of money bills. 199, definition of money bills. Article 200, assent to bills. 201, bills reserved for consideration. Procedure in financial matters. Article 202, annual financial statement. 203, procedure in legislature with respect to estimates. 204, appropriation bills. 205, supplementary, additional and excess grants. 206, oaths on accounts, oaths of credit and exceptional grants. 207, special provisions as to financial bills. Procedure generally. 208, rules of procedure. 209, regulation by law of procedure in the legislature of the state in relation to financial business. 210, language to be used in legislature. 211, restriction on discussion in the legislature. 212, courts not to inquire into proceedings of the legislature. Chapter 4, legislative power of the governor. Article 213, power of governor to promulgate ordinance during recess of legislature. Chapter 5, the high courts in the states. Article 214, high courts for states. 215, high courts to be the courts of records. 216, constitution of high courts. 217, appointment and condition of the office of a judge of a high court. 218, application of certain provisions related to the Supreme Court to high courts. 219, oath or affirmation by the judges of high courts. Article 220, restriction on practice after being a permanent judge. 221, salaries, etc. of judges. 222, transfer of a judge from one high court to another. 223, appointment of acting chief justice. 224, appointment of additional and acting judges. 224A, appointment of retired judges as a sitting of high courts, at sitting of high courts. Article 225, jurisdiction of existing high courts. Article 226, power of high court to issue certain writs. Article 226A is now omitted. It was related to the constitutional validity of certain laws not to be considered in proceedings under Article 226, that is omitted. That is Schedule 9, part of this Schedule 9. Article 227, power of superintendence over all courts by the high courts. Article 228, transfer of certain cases to high courts. Article 228A, special provisions as to disposal of questions related to the constitutional validity of state's law is now omitted. This Article 228A is now omitted. Article 229, officers and servants and the expenses of high courts. Article 230, extension of the jurisdiction of high courts to union territory. 231, establishment of common high courts for 2 or more states. Article 232, Articles 230, 231 and 232 substituted by Article 230 and 231. I am repeating it again for better understanding. Article 229, officers and servants and the expenses of high courts. Article 230, extension of jurisdiction of high courts to union territories. Article 231, establishment of common high court for 2 or more states. 232, Article 230, 231 and 232 substituted by Article 230 and 231. Chapter 6, subordinate courts. Article 233, appointment of district judges. Article 233A, validation of appointment of and judgment, etc., delivered by the certain district judges. Article 234, recruitment of persons other than the district judge to the judicial service. 235, control over subordinate courts. 236, interpretation. 237, application of the provision of the chapter to certain class or classes of magistrates. Part 7 omitted. This was related to the states in Part B of the first schedule, that is Article 238, now omitted. So friends, this is related to Part 2. Now we'll see next articles in Part 3. Thank you. Thank you very much. Jai Hind. Vande Mataram.